why are they setting beehives on fire in New Zealand? So it started with the ostriches in Canada, and now they're burning quite literally healthy beehives in New Zealand. Don't you remember what Albert Einstein said regarding the bees? If you don't, I got you. He said that all the bees died off, that within 4 years, life would no longer exist on the earth. Now, completely unrelated, 1000% not relevant at all to this behind me. Do you know how good honey is for us? I mean, it's really like a miracle substance. The antibacterial quality of this honey, that it can last for thousands of years. I mean, it's actually insane. It's been used for treatment for so many things over the thousands of years. Oh right, the honeybee die-off and also the flamethrowing of beehives. Check out this crazy article. And there's a lot of other research, scientific research, showing that frequency harms these bees. A whole bunch of stuff. You saw that, right? TikTok, it is proven. But wait a minute, they say the bee population's increasing. No, these are managed beehives. But this chart right here shows a massive decline in the population in the hives of bees. It's literally been cut in half over 20-30 years. And while they say that it's not happening, the bee population's fine, even AI knows it's a load of bullcrap. But not just AI. Researchers at Washington State are projecting that commercial honeybee colony could be 60 to 70% lost this year. Wonder what's going on.
So, digging into this one, it looks like they're doing something bad, but I think this is not anything to be alarmed about. Apparently, they're burning these hives because of a highly infectious disease called AFB. At first, it looked like this was just an excuse for the government to start destroying the bee population. But upon closer inspection, I don't think that's what's going on here. Looking at the total number of hives destroyed so far, estimated to be as high as 2,700. If you compare that to the number of hives they've destroyed for the exact same reason in the past few years, the number is actually declining. Over 3,100 hives in 2023 and over 3,400 hives in 2021. And y'all ought to know I'm all about pointing out when the government is doing something to intentionally make our lives more miserable. And I could be completely wrong, but from everything I'm seeing, it looks like this may be a legitimate effort to actually save the bee population. And I hate that it sounds like I'm just sitting here running cover for the government and defending them while they light bee colonies on fire, especially after the ostrich situation that just played out in Canada. What an atrocity. But while this doesn't have the best optics, it does appear that it's working when you look at the trend of the number of affected hives going down. Besides that, I looked to see if there were any alternative methods that could be used to fight against this AFB stuff, and there just isn't one. And the AFB would have wiped those colonies out anyways. But the spores that it would leave behind could infect new colonies for decades. And it's so resistant to heat and disinfectants that burning it seems to be the only viable option for destroying it. So, although a rarity, this appears to be one of those cases where the government is potentially actually trying to help. And from the numbers I was looking at, it doesn't appear that there's going to be any significant drop in honey production over this either. It's a fairly common issue and a fairly common practice.
Mayor Brandon Johnson is asking the United Nations to intervene to stop your operations. Here is what he said before the UN Human Rights Council. Listen to this.
The federal government's immigration enforcement has been marked by violence and an assault on the dignity of all Chicagoans. I call on this council to hold the federal government of the United States to the same standards of accountability you apply elsewhere in the world. No country should be above international law. I urge the Human Rights Council to consider additional measures of accountability, including a special session to examine the worsening human rights crisis in the United States.
Tom, this is just pure lunacy, but what is your reaction to all of that?
He just proved he's not that smart, right? I mean, asking the United Nations to talk, interfere with ICE enforcing U.S. law is like asking an arsonist how to stop a fire. Because the UN, remember, the IOM, the part of the UN, helped fund the mass migration during the Biden administration 4 years, spending millions upon millions of dollars helping that migration, international migration come to the United States. So, the United Nations is not going to tell President Trump what to do. President Trump was put in office on the promise of making this country safe again, on the promise of having the historic deportation operation. That's exactly what America is getting. Every criminal alien ICE and Border Patrol takes off the street makes this country safer. We have the most secure border in the history of the nation right now because of leadership of President Trump, the men and women of the Border Patrol, and because ICE. What ICE is doing in the interior every day, they've sent a message across the globe. Don't spend your life savings, cross the border illegally, think you're going to get away in the United States. Because of what ICE is doing, people aren't spending their life savings, putting themselves in harm's way. Thousands of people aren't dying making that journey. Thousands of Americans aren't dying from fentanyl because of that secure border. But the actions of the interior, the ICE and Border Patrol, has a lot to do why we have the most secure border in the history of this nation today.
And you're doing such a great job, Tom. Kevin Cork here.
Is this guy really saying that no country should be above international law? He's clearly on the side of the one world government agenda. I really feel like we should have better methods in place for getting these nut jobs out of office. Asking a foreign entity to intervene in the legal and perfectly humane actions of your country's current administration. Actions being performed by a president who literally campaigned and got elected on his promise to do this very thing. That mayor should no longer be eligible to hold public office. Technically speaking, this could be, and in my opinion should be, considered as treason or rebellion. We aren't under the jurisdiction of anyone except for the U.S. federal government. And there are days that I feel like that needs to be called into question. But you don't request a foreign entity to come in and intervene against your federal government. I'm sure that nothing's going to happen to this guy, though. These politicians can pretty much say and do whatever they want, and nothing ever happens to him. That man is a threat to the United States, and he needs to be prosecuted. The moment the United Nations tries to send troops into the United States to do anything, they're going to realize very quickly how big of a mistake that was. This isn't the UK. We've got a nation full of people who are patriotic to a fault. And those are the guys who always seem to be armed to the teeth. That would be a literal recipe for disaster. These people need to at least try to think before they speak. Hey, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to drop your theories and your comments in the comments section down below.
Canada's officially the dumbest country on the planet, and so are most of the Canadians that voted for this. I'm not even kidding. You guys are so dumb that you don't even realize the police chief is trying to tell you right now to lose all ability for your survival skills. That's the PSYOPs. So if you don't know what's going on, we had a guy break into a home in Welland, Ontario, and a 5-year-old child. He essayed a 5-year-old child while the parents were sleeping. And you want to know what's happened to him? Nothing. He's out on bail. Why? Because Canada loves and criminals just like their entire government. And the people that voted for this are so stupid. You actually deserve this. I hope your homes get doxxed so that these foreign criminals can come in, bend you over just like the government did in 2020 when you complied for this, you little lab rats. And then you call the government on your neighbors and your friends and everything because you're so stupid. If you don't know what's going on, there's been a bunch of gun crime, illegal gun crime, because you took away gun ownership, and by illegals who are now going into homes in Ontario and literally taking whatever they want. And you want to know what the police chief said? He said comply. He said Canadians should comply, and if you don't, we failed as a community. Just listen to this piece of and what he says.
But as it stands, we know the best defense for most people is to comply, as you've just heard a number of
just comply, you guys.
Recommendations will allow for those that are victimizing members in the community to leave and not
They'll just leave.
harm anyone.
Why didn't we think of that?
It sometimes can fall on deaf ears when members feel like they have to take matters into their own hands. And the only thing I'd say is, if we are going to rely on our community members to take matters into their own hands to solve this problem, we have all failed our community.
Yeah, you dummy Canadian pieces of comply. You're so racist. If you fight back, you're racist. Ew. Dear women in Toronto who have been getting to comply, you dumb. Comply! This is what you voted for. You love this. Equal rights for everybody, right, you guys? If somebody comes into your home, comply like you did in 2020. If they try and your children, comply. You know, get the camera out, have a little fun with it. You're Canadian. You don't deserve to live. You don't deserve to actually, like, fight back. You're just a piece of shit that the government uses as punching bags and tax slaves so that they can keep funding the tax laundering money in the Ukraine. Comply, you stupid. That's what the government is telling you. That is the psyops. And I swear, all of the 70% that fucking, like, did this are gonna listen to this exact same thing because you're dumb and you're stupid and you deserve it.
That was a really harsh way to put it, but I can't say I completely disagree with the point she's making. I will say the people of Canada are not stupid, but they've certainly behaved in a way that could be described as such. Voting in all these people who clearly have ties to this 2030 one world government agenda. I'm betting this never would have happened, though, if there weren't so many lies being pushed by the government. If they weren't overwhelmed with all this propaganda they have to defend themselves against. The people of Canada did nothing wrong other than getting swept up in the narrative. When they were told that voting a specific way was the compassionate and the humane way to vote, yeah, it was stupid to buy that at face value. But since I was a kid, there's been this trope that Canadians are nice to a fault. It looks to me like the Canadian government trained its citizens to be a bunch of pushovers, for lack of a better term. And when they were given a choice and then instructed heavily through media and propaganda on which of the two was the more kind out of the options, they simply chose with their hearts instead of their heads. And I genuinely feel like that's a big part of what's happening here in the United States. People have got to figure out a way to get rid of this emotional reaction that they keep having when they hear something they don't like from the federal government. That's what they always play off of. All that being said, hopefully now the Canadian people can finally see why that form of governance was such a bad idea. At least they'll see it coming, though. They voted for this stuff. We're about to get hit with everything the rest of the world is getting hit with, like digital currency and this big government tracking network, and we didn't vote for any of this garbage. Most of the people in this country don't even know this stuff is coming. At least in Canada, the people can likely see the writing on the wall. Most of the folks here in the US are walking around ignorant and blind.
What if I told you that your electricity bill isn't just paying for the power you use? It might also be paying off Wall Street's debt. As the old meme goes, it's more likely than you think. Here's how private capital works. Firms like asset management giant BlackRock don't usually buy companies with their own money. Instead, they raise giant funds from pension systems, governments, and wealthy investors. When they go shopping, whether it's for a factory, a toll road, even your power company, they use part equity from those investors and part debt borrowed from banks and bond markets. Here's the catch. That debt doesn't sit on BlackRock's books. It sits on the company they just bought. And it's the company, not the asset manager, that has to pay it back. Now, when the company is a utility, like water, gas, or electricity, it's not just any business. Utilities are monopolies. You can't just shop around for a new power company. So where does the money to pay back that debt come from? It comes from you, the ratepayers. In leveraged acquisitions of utilities, the bills you pay every month are the revenue stream that services Wall Street's loans. Let's take a real case. Last month, state regulators approved a $6.2 billion buyout of Elite, the parent company of Minnesota Power, the state's main power utility. The buyers? Global Infrastructure Partners, which is owned by BlackRock, together with Canada's pension fund. A public utility that hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans rely on is shifting into the hands of private capital. Critics, like one administrative law judge who advised the acquisition be stopped because it's not in the public interest, warn that buyers are paying a big premium over the utility's actual worth here, potentially hundreds of millions above market value. And when investors pay more, they expect to earn more back. Where's that money going to come from? Well, the fear is from higher rates or cuts to services, bigger bills for you while your utilities get worse, while BlackRock collects steady fees for managing the investment, win or lose. If the debt is too much and the company defaults, it's not BlackRock that collapses, it's the utility. Government regulators and taxpayers are often forced to step in to keep the lights on, but the asset managers usually insulated. They've already collected their fees. The Minnesota power deal is part of a multi-billion-dollar trend where private capital is actively targeting regulated U.S. utilities, from electric to water systems. It's happening everywhere, from El Paso Electric to Northern Indiana Public Service Company. And the debt risk is real. The largest utility leveraged buyout in U.S. history, the $45 billion acquisition of TXU in Texas, ultimately led to a $40 billion bankruptcy, proving that these Wall Street bets can and do fail. So the next time you open your power bill, it might be worth asking whether you're paying for one of those Wall Street bets.
Reports suggest that BlackRock, under the investment firm GIP, are exploring larger purchases, including a minority stake in several other U.S. states as well. But no deal is finalized yet. This includes power companies in the Carolinas, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Virginia, Utah, Ohio, California, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. And Canada is involved in this deal? How is the federal government protecting us citizens if they're going to allow another foreign government to come in and purchase and maintain some form of control over any portion of our power grid? That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of. Talk about giving away your leverage. I guess we know how the tariffs against Canada are eventually going to get lowered. They'll just threaten to start cutting people's power off if they don't get lowered. This is by far one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of our government doing. This makes no sense at all. I have no doubt, though, the only reason this is getting pushed through is because a lot of people are getting their pockets lined with this deal. But none of this will ever be resolved because they're never going to lock up these dirty politicians that are literally selling out the American people.
5 years ago, the WEF told us that by 2030, we would own nothing. That is all tied into the UN Agenda 2030, which digital ID is one of those things that is tied into that agenda. But in 5 years, how have we gone from ownership of things to steadily moving towards non-ownership? Well, the first thing we can see here is in homes. Home ownership. A lot of people have been priced out. Ownership in general of homes has remained flat over the last 5 years. Meanwhile, rent has skyrocketed and it has gone up by 5.6 million over the last 5 years. So rent is increasing, home ownership staying flat, and will eventually start to decline. They'll price people out. Right now, the younger generation that should be owning homes, Gen Z, has been priced out, and they are the largest generation ever to be renting. That's your big ticket item. Everything else has started moving to a subscription-based model, if you've noticed. In the past, we used to own certain things. We used to just buy them at the store and have the actual media in hand, but now it's all subscription. Cars are starting to do this. Toyota, Mercedes, BMW, they're starting to create subscription services for features in their cars. Farming equipment, John Deere, they will shut down the software in a John Deere tractor if you don't have the subscription service to have their men, their mechanics, fix it when it breaks down. Printers, HP has an ink subscription program. If you got that ink and it's in the printer and you canceled your subscription, your printer will stop working. The other things that we have, movies and music, that is all moved to streaming services. They can remove things that you purchased because it's all held in their cloud, not in your own hands. We no longer have CDs, DVDs, it's all digital based. Gaming systems, the new Switch 2, they can shut you down if they don't like what you're doing. So you won't have access to your games if they don't like what you're doing. Software, you used to be able to own software like your Adobe Creative Suite, Quicken, Microsoft Office. All of that, again, is moved to subscription. You don't own the software anymore, but you pay to use it regularly. Ebooks, all on Kindle. In 2009, Amazon took off George Orwell's books, and so if you had even purchased the digital version, it was just gone from your library. These kind of things is what Agenda 2030 is all about. And with the digital ID, they can shut you down, they can shut you out of any of this kind of access. So there it is, incremental steps to owning nothing and making you a regular slave, paying regularly in order to use these services that we used to just buy once and have in hand. Combine that with digital ID, you step out a lot on social media, you do something that they don't like, they can shut you down now on any of these services as well. This is the agenda. This is where they're going. This is how we will own nothing.
This guy makes a really good point, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying the other day about how we've been sitting here watching in horror as all these countries overseas start instituting these crazy control measures. But that while that's been going on, they've been quietly behind the scenes switching us over a little bit at a time to the same system, and we haven't even noticed. But any service that I used to use that switched over to this subscription-based model, I just completely replaced it with something else. If we all started boycotting that nonsense, they would have no choice but to go back to the way things used to be. They would have to cut it out. I absolutely refuse to use an Adobe product. I used to be really heavy into photography, and I used Adobe products like crazy. I used Adobe Photoshop to edit all my photos. I edited all my video footage on Adobe Premiere. I was in the process of learning Adobe After Effects and getting into it pretty heavy whenever they switched to this subscription-based model. I continued using it for a short while until it reached the point where they were forcing you to sign up for a subscription, and then I was done with it. I just learned how to use Final Cut Pro, and that's what I'm editing on right now. What's going to keep this all going, though, is all of the people who just blindly follow along like, oh, guess this is the way things work now. We all need to collectively start punishing these companies by just refusing to use their products anymore. If we all did that, they would have no choice but to go back to doing things the old way.
Starting December 16th, Meta will start reading your DMs. Every conversation, every photo, every voice message fed into AI and used for profit. So here's how to stop it. Now, they make this intentionally difficult on purpose, and you can only do this on desktop. You cannot do this from the mobile app. So first, you're going to visit privacycenter.instagram.com, and it's going to take you to this page here. And what you want to do is you click on Other Policies and Articles, and you'll see where it says how Meta uses information for generative AI models and features. Click here, and the third option is Privacy and Generative AI. You open this, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see it says, whether you use Meta products or not, anyone can submit requests related to their personal information from third parties being used to develop and improve AI at Meta. You click on Learn More and Submit Requests here, and this is the form that you want to submit. So you click this, fill out this information here, and send this, and this is how you submit to opt out of Meta using your information to improve their AI services.
I just wanted to throw that in there for anyone who still uses Facebook Messenger regularly. They roll out these changes all the time, but they don't ever tell anyone that they're making them. I don't send anything important through Facebook Messenger. Heck, if it wasn't for Facebook Marketplace, I wouldn't even use Facebook at all. Unfortunately, it is the world's best online yard sale. But if it weren't for that, I wouldn't even be on Facebook. I know a lot of you have tried to reach out to me on there, but if you're wondering why I haven't responded, I don't even answer my friends' messages on it. They've got my phone number. They know how to reach me, because I've always just assumed that anything you send through Messenger is being cataloged somewhere. Even whenever I go meet someone off a marketplace and purchase a product, and it has that little thing that pops up in Messenger that's asking, did you purchase this product or did you sell this product? I always click, I'd rather not answer. Or I'll just lie to it and say no. It's not really any of their business. But Zuckerberg has been caught doing something shady far too many times for me to trust Facebook.
The spread of hatred and lies online is causing grave harm to our world. Misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech are fueling prejudice and violence, exacerbating divisions and conflicts, demonizing minorities, and compromising the integrity of elections. Threats to information integrity are not new, but they are proliferating and expanding with unprecedented speed on digital platforms and supercharged by AI technologies. Science, facts, human rights, public health, climate action are under attack. And when information integrity is targeted, so is democracy, which depends on a shared, fact-based perception of reality. False narratives, distortions, and lies breed cynicism, disbelief, and disengagement. They undermine social cohesion, putting the Sustainable Development Goals further out of reach. Opaque algorithms push people into information bubbles and reinforce prejudices, including racism, misogyny, and discrimination of all kinds. Women, refugees, migrants, and minorities are common targets. Lives are at stake when lies are spread about vaccines and other medical issues. The United Nations' own operations and missions are compromised as our staff deal with a tsunami of falsehoods and absurd conspiracy theories. We demand action. First, to the big tech companies, take responsibility. Acknowledge the damage your products are inflicting on people and communities, and you have the power to mitigate harm to people and societies around the world. You have the power to change business models that profit from disinformation and hate. The climate crisis is a cause of particular concern. Coordinated disinformation campaigns are seeking to undermine climate action.
I think the biggest takeaway from that for me is that he's literally sitting there talking about the spread of misinformation, that it needs to be stamped out, while simultaneously pushing the climate change narrative. It's infuriating that the people who are in control of the world are the biggest liars in the world. And those are the ones who are just slowly taking over everything. And before long, if you don't go along with their lies, you won't be allowed to be included in the society that they've taken control of. These people are disgusting. Then he goes on to start talking about how people need to stop saying disparaging things about the migrant population, the migrant populations that are destroying entire countries and destroying the lives of the citizens of the countries that they're invading. This world is headed in a very dark direction, and it won't be long. They will institute some form of ID requirement for access to the internet so they can start shutting down dissenting voices. And channels like mine will be the first to go. It's people like you and me that they're trying to stop. I can't help but to be a little obsessed over trying to stay current on what atrocities are taking place in the world. I just get on here and try to tip off as many people that are willing to listen about what's actually happening around them so they can go spread that information to their friends and family. Because that's the only way that information like this gets out nowadays, is through all these back channels. The mainstream media sold out long ago. They're clearly a part of the globalist agenda, but they're going to have no choice but to do everything they can to stop stuff like this. Otherwise, they'll never successfully take control of all the things that they intend to. And I fully intend to keep this going as long as I possibly can. If they institute ID requirements for internet access, y'all will know why I've suddenly stopped posting. I'm not playing their games. I'll just drop out of this society altogether before I comply with this evil agenda. Unless, of course, I can find a way to circumvent these ID requirements. But non-compliance is basically the only tool we've got left at this point. But guys and gals, I'm going to go ahead and end the video right there. I hope you enjoyed these clips we watched together today. God willing, I'll be back tomorrow with another one. I hope you come back to join me. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to drop your theories and your comments in the comments section down below. But guys and gals, I hope everyone has a great, safe, fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you all tomorrow.